Yeah, cool. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all having a wonderful time from wherever you're tuning in. It's a real pleasure to have you all here. As I said, if you're not comfortable with being recorded, you can turn your camera off and enjoy the show discreetly. It's gonna be okay. I'm Fred, and this is the second session of our Reverie poetry series. Reverie is a monthly event series coordinated by students in the Department of Comparative Literature at the Graduate Center, CUNY, inviting affiliated faculty and guest speakers from broad areas of interdisciplinary practices. Reverie provides a platform for reflection and public discourse on poetry, innovative fiction, critical theory and philosophy, independent publishing, and translation. Today, we're meeting with three of the most original writers working the intersection of fiction, poetry, theory, and graphic design. Each of them proclaims novel sensibilities, distinctive gestures, and paradoxical codifications of media ecologies, revoking the access of previous formalisms in writing. I'm gonna start with Mike, who is the author of numerous works, including Got Text, published by 1111 Press, Rituals Performed in the Absence of Ganymede, also published by 1111 Press, Desert Tiles by EQ's Press, and Smut Maker, published by Inside the Castle. His work often explores the haptic, architectural, and organismal qualities of the text object. As an artist and designer, his work has been featured in the catalogs of 1111 Press, Phonograph Editions, Apocalypse Party, Inside the Castle, and other presses. As an editor, he operates cloak.wtf. How are you, Mike? How's your day so far?
Doing pretty good. I'm excited to
Awesome.
get into this piece.
Sounds great. Exciting for spring, right?
Yeah,
No,
I'm in Minnesota and it's finally starting to get nice out again. So very
amazing.
exciting time.
That's awesome. So now we'd love to listen to your passage. And if you want to share your screen, you're welcome to do that,
Sure
which is
thing.
from, uh-huh.
Yeah, so I'm going to be reading a small section from a book that I have upcoming called Underreef from Onomatopoeia Press. And so this is towards the middle of the book, which is exploring the idea of the text becoming something more planetary. So I'll get started for you. Architecture, summoning literature, a terra unstrung from disparate sources, humming the biodata. Pull my thread and you will see this body come undone. And then what? A literature of vomiting cattle, something laid out as corridors through the pagefuls, bindings sutured by will. The S key is near faded, worn from running backwards all day. We are feeding on the paper mill runoff, pulp suspended in solution and then flattened into hexahedron of surfaces. The literature, post-texture, that permeates this space is not fully coherent. It is babbling with a cut tongue, and when I press my hand against it, I can feel the breath escape from its lungs, as if only my full weight can release the pressure. And you think this will create a new understanding of the text? Or is it only for your own amusement, deriving pleasure from scattered esoterica, purple prose, and repetitive constructions? I want to see every building torn down and replaced by detritus. As the tumor grows on your stomach, on your forehead, on your lip, you can see that the text has revealed itself. An affliction, a maleficent force, a bed of spores, all passing the threshold from here into the world where you live, taking its time to form something violently new. A face pressing through the elastic video screen, metamorphosis at all, whining sirens. Every way station diagnoses the infection, assesses the progress of the textural machine, moving from hand through your skin into the bloodstream. Transmission. I am writhing in the solarist flare, bathing in tamarind milk, looking on as the lemur sings your song atop a sarcophagus, ornamented in decorative ophanim and seraphim. An ocular monster, something with 1,000 eyes, a witness for globular delights, starched births. Letting the growth swell and eventually burst, a plume of smoke, spores, all the dusts of life, particles suspended over your head, and let to drift slowly onto the page matter, or another environment like it, somewhere laid from pulp and loam, where the nodal point will surface, and all offspring will push forth. Post-texture, terratextural, pushing the bug powder, feeding on the ink that confines us, and saying something like, there is no ghost behind the wall. Scene, a whirling fire, the rising atmosphere, a body sutured to the earth. The OSS emits noise into the void, accumulating disparate particles to form something that's not necessarily unified, but wholly present. a system of matter, objects to occupy the object-oriented system, ink speckling the page, creating indiscernible shapes and promoting anomalous ecological growths. An organism permeates beneath the surface. The hexahedron unfolds into 100 plateaus of separation, each articulating as an autonomous limb, flat, topographical, promoting a landscape of potentialities, each guy in its ambitions. The book is not so much an organism all its own, but the sentient geological host of a million microbes. Something is brewing in the water, a parthenogenetic bacterium or a budding kudzu tooth. All begins as an emission. This is the noise that permeates our inception, the geodata sonification that hums from dense stones and topsoil, vocalized by Inoki, caught by the canopies, a hybrid offspring, sculpting the fat around your head, playing with your tongue against the levered keratin, stuck between your teeth and gums. What are you playing at? The machine is using these materials to shape us. It is planting an organism in your skull. And I think I'll stop there because that is the chunk of the PDF I removed. So thank you so much for
Beautiful.
listening.
Thank you so much for presenting that. That was amazing. Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect, Zero. Of course. So I'm gonna jump into this video, and then we're gonna head to the discussions and questions. Okay. So Vi Khi Nao is the author of 6 poetry collections: Fish Carcass by Blackstone Lit, A Bell Curve is a Pregnant Straight Line by 1111 Press, Human Tetris by 1111 Press 2, Ship Machine by Blackstone Lit, Umbilical Hospital by Press 1913, The Old Philosopher, winner of the Nightboat Prize for 2014, and the short stories collection, A Brief Alphabet of Torture, winner of the FC2's Ronald Sukenick Innovative Fiction Prize, the novel Fish in Exile, Coffee House Press. Her works include poetry, fiction, film, and cross-genre collaboration. Her first play, Waiting for Godot, is out of Apocalypse Party in January 2022. She was a fall 2019 fellow of the Black Mountain Institute. And how is it going, Vi? How are you today?
Hi, Frederick.
Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you, Jared and Derek, for having me here. I'm excited to be part of this series in the initial state. I'm going to read from, well, originally I was going to read predominantly from Swimming with Dead Stars, but I might read a little bit from my collaboration with my partner Jess. So let's see. Okay. So this is from page 164 of Swimming with Dead Star. During the long drive to the new Airbnb, Madone read Hemingway's Death in the Afternoon, and Neptune gazed out of the long, isolating, desolate landscape of Alpha Tau. They crossed 2 aqueducts, 3 dams, 2 construction sites, and escaped a dozen roadblocks. The ride made her bilious and seasick as if they were on a boat, but this vehicle was no yacht. Then Madone recalled the planet reciting her semi-lucid echolalia. They knuckleized me, they knuckleized me, they knuckleized me. That's what you kept on repeating. She reread the line on the page 54 of Hemingway. True mysticism should not be confused with incompetence in writing, which seeks to mystify where there is no mystery, but it is really only the necessity to fake, to cover lack of knowledge, or the inability to state clearly. Mysticism implies a mystery, and there are so many mysteries, but incompetence is not one of them. The nausea came with or without the bullfighting. Without much thinking, she gripped one cock's feathery exterior and by pure defeat, plucked one feather from him. You don't mind, do you? She asked. He turned his foully head around in alarm as he earmarked the page with her makeshift bookmark. He didn't seem to agree, but he didn't really have a choice. She begged the driver to pull over, and then when he pulled over, she stepped out and picked up her breakfast, fried eggs, boiled eggs, mooncake, a glass of water, a constellation of split dream between reality and a half-vomited life. When she stood up from puking, she studied the whiteness of the summer dress her mother has made for her and the scarf that planet Mercury had gifted to her after his brief travel to Pakistan, and stared at the desolation of Alpha mixed with the calm despondency of the rice field. She noticed the postman strolling by in the grass with his mail stroller. If he wasn't wearing his postman uniform, it would look as if he were carting a baby. She liked the idea of him there. It was comforting and almost disenabling. She didn't seem to put a finger on it. She couldn't seem to put a finger on it, like he wasn't supposed to be there, but somehow or some way, God forced him to be there. Be that lonesome blue figure in blue prose on that green field of wretchedness. A rabbit hopped into view, lingering lightly, its arm tucked up, a softness to the bastard's petite hylaxity that made him unbearably beautiful there. Instead of declaring the non-existent nature of her pregnancy, it wakes its V-shaped ears. Rabbits have a shearing susceptibility and defensiveness about them, she has always felt, but they chew grass, and this hyperorous state of consumption somehow made them both suitor impervious to harm and abuse. She stared down at the vomit, a nobody's art piece, immaterial and uneducational, and spoke to it. I pull you out of me, and now you are just squatting there, useless, not moving an inch. If she wasn't still narcotized, she might have imagined masturbatory laughter from the content's tactility. To operate on me, they had to obliterate, to stop my heart. They are obligated to stop my heart. They're going to stop my heart. They're going to stop my heart like a stop sign, she reminded herself. From vomit to a potential mental agenda on the list, she wiped her mouth with a scarf. In the Victorian and post-Victorian era, paradise could last forever. One's attention span could afford it. But what about now, thought Madone? The most important question for all modern species in the information age was this: how long should paradise last? And how long should she keep on eating chickens at her current rate when she knew it was not the antidote to happiness and a game changer for genocide? I'm a machine. I have always been a machine, Madone told herself. And now the surgeon was planning to reboot her. The next time she woke up, she would have a new operating system. They would have replaced and updated her memory, allow her the supersonic ability to travel faster. The war to sustain Darwinism was dead. The game of the fittest was just a game, a fantasy game in a video console called material realism. Not everyone gathered hands and cocks to hug them before the carnage, but Madone just did just that. And now she was addressing her own death. She was no longer a machine. And then I'm going to read a little bit from That Woman Could Be You. And it's from the title of the same name. So this is a table of contents. And so I'm reading from the section that says, That Woman Could Be You. The blue night is not sad, sightless, or cramped over an instrument, but the sky is vicious as oil paint, and the solo glow like gray smiles. You help stretch my legs, and because my heels have cracked, you rub lotion into my feet. We took photographs. In bed, you smile and said, "Vi, you are a strange woman." And I said, "What do you mean?" Our periods in unison and syncopated transform us into brittle leaves. Even when we walked in circle around Zeppelin station, even after you order red wine, which has plenty of iron, even when I showed you the great divide, the bar which took my small body in when the sky roared with striated thunder and lightning, even when we walked underneath a Denver scaffolding, holding hands, even when you order a big burger with fried meat layer in white cheese, an herb that made me think of sorrel. Even when my rice arrived with my fried chicken looking like one breast of a woman, I thought how easily a woman could get raped running near or along a railroad track, using her phone as a makeshift flashlight. That woman could be you thought. And I thought that woman could be me. We slept on fondly early at 9 p.m. I see you over and over again. And later you understood it was a horror film I would never watch or swallow. Your period, your reason has been waiting for me. And in waiting, it has oxidized into a chocolate cake neither one of us can eat. Before bed, I stacked two maxi beds on top of one another. We couldn't find my colossal pads the side of two serving boards, which prevent me from turning our bed into a biblical river, the one where water transforms to blood. Okay, that's it.
Amazing. Thank you so much
It could be
for
you.
that. You were great. So I don't know if Germán is here. I don't think he is. Looking at it, and I don't see him. So we might just get jump to the questions and discussion a little bit. I'm just gonna open up for anyone who wants to come out with a question. If not, I'll just throw myself in. And just gonna ask you guys, the first question has to do with nonverbal communication, intimacy, perceptual insights, and the atmosphere of the mind in relation to the organs or to the organismal structure inside the text. How do you recreate that? How do you produce that in your text? And how do you think are the most sustainable images inside of it? Just thinking of the idea of the body in writing. How do you
Yeah, I
picture
can
it?
hop in on this.
Awesome.
I think that over time I've gotten more interested in that kind of relationship with the text, the kind of bodily elements in a more visual space, thinking of it as kind of a navigability of the text. So thinking of that underreef passage, finding ways to like reorient the position of the reader so it's more of an interaction rather than strictly a reading. Thinking of the body as something that you interact with, um, rather than something that you just kind of look at the projection that's placed on it. And so I think trying to pull the reader kind of into that very present moment, kind of avoiding any type of kind of like verisimilitude. Like I don't want you to kind of get into that fantasy world. I think having that confrontation with something physical like that feels like the most compelling kind of bodily interaction within the text to me.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. And it also has to do with a sense of ludology and gamification of the whole interaction. So you
Totally.
it feels almost like a video game somehow.
Yeah, part of me has been kind of interested in the idea of trying to incorporate mechanics to some extent, game mechanics into a piece. Although I think that might be very hard to do without it being gimmicky, because I think there's that kind of immediate idea of like including like dice rolls or something or some type of kind of immediate like chance function that the reader has to do. But I'm not fully sure kind of how to do it without that immediate gimmick. One idea that I've had and that I've kind of explored a bit is the idea of making the way by which the reader moves through the text somewhat ambiguous. And so the gamification is instead kind of you determining your own route through the page, kind of not giving it that obvious, like top left to bottom right kind of directionality. And so maybe the gamification comes in the ambiguity, the lack of direction that you give someone.
Absolutely. Very rhizomatic and Deleuzian, for sure.
I can't escape that.
No, we can't escape that. And there's an element of cinematic sequence I get from both of you. Like you're always trying to reach at a point where the text is a representation of cinema, of the cinema of the scene.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, God. ahead.
Oh, sorry. I had kind of a follow-up for either of you when you were talking about the confrontation with the text and move, sort of trying to get people to move through the text and grapple with the text in a different way. I was wondering, like, the relationship between printed matter and the limitations. Like, if you're making a one-off book, like if you're making a book, you can actually manipulate the page in a physical way, and I think that can be really interesting. But if you're trying to rely on a publisher and it's going to be printed in more than a couple copies, that becomes less possible. And I'm just wondering, and then there is, like, you have online publication, and I'm just wondering, like, how these things shape how you think about because there are so many different ways that you could get people to interact differently, but they're maybe not all that practical for if you want to reach more than just a couple people. I'm really curious how you grapple with that and how you deal with that.
Yeah, I think that the difficulty is kind of, you have to approach it with this understanding that it's either going to be a large scale print run or print on demand, and working with those confines kind of right away. At least in a personal sense, I lack the mechanical talents to handle the actual physical bookmaking. And so I think that in terms of the physicality, because I find a lot of interest there, I think removing that I think a lot of narrative work people talk about like getting sucked into a book or like lost in a book. And I think that creating a space where that's not possible forces you to, even if it's not like a kind of especially tactile or unique like construction for the book, not having that narrative to get lost in kind of forces you to confront the physical object. And I think that that's the space that I'm very curious about. Lately, I've been really interested in the gutter of the book and the idea of things getting lost in there. Ingram Spark and KDP and a lot of print on demand services a lot of the pages end up getting like eaten up by the gutter. You lose a lot of that space, and kind of playing with almost trying to get the reader to kind of move into it and kind of pull the book apart in an extent. I'm really compelled by. So I think you have to first kind of figure out the constraints of that medium, specifically of the like kind of cheaply produced print on demand title, and then kind of prodding at what kind of quirks that kind of physicality has. But the gutter has been fascinating. I really do want to make a book that people are compelled to pull apart and kind of rip in half.
Definitely. And the a question for you, talking about the role of the body, will you define it as a diaspora or a mobilization or nomadism between machine and the physical body? I don't know if that resonates anything, but how would you describe that relationship?
Between the body and the machine, the physical body?
Between the body and the machine, in this case.
Well, in this case, like, I was depicting the experience of what is it like to shut down a machine down, which is like the body, my physical body. I was depicting an open heart surgery, in which the surgeon is literally, what a surgeon does with I think a propulsionist, in which their role is to transport all of your blood out from your body into a machine. Because when you operate on a heart, the body can't be floating, the heart can't be floating in a swimming pool of blood. And so the surgeon is literally, if you were to fix your laptop, for instance, if you spill coffee on it and you need to reboot your computer, you're not going to reboot it by adding more coffee or adding more liquid into it. You would try to dry the system out. And I think because I live in the desert for a little bit, I actually love Las Vegas so much. I oftentimes think, okay, you know, like the body, if the landscape of Vegas, of Sin City is a desert, then my heart and its landscape is also becoming a desert before the open heart surgery. It's also a space of you know, like I think about Jesus who walked the 40 days and I don't know, 40 nights, what a prayer time, and that that trinity, that experience between that meditative space, which I think exists when one reboots. I sometimes people don't think of it like desiccating the laptop, desiccating the keystrokes, you know, or desiccating the landscape of the material in which we use it as a machine for productivity. And so I am a machine that produces literature, but also my laptop is also producing literature. And oftentimes we're not in competition with one another. I don't think the publishing, when it publishes digital material, is not in competition. It is in competition with instant gratification, or the amount of productivity that exists in high productions like books. But when I was at Brown and we did, when a lot of my peers program literary materials like poetry and poems and short stories into a computer and ask it to perform kinesthetically digital materials, so we get to see it interact in interactivities. And I feel like there's a lot of room for that level of repetitions and reproductions. And so the challenge for any writer is to become a programmer of some sort. We can be a programmer from a physical plane or a digital plane, and those. When I was bookbinding in doing my undergraduate degrees, I'm programming the spine of the book. I'm programming the way the pages are being laid out. So programmers operate like that on a digital plane. And so those two kind of interact with each other in ways that I don't feel like they are in separate entities, but they can be a type of unification from experimentation. I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely, more than that, beyond that. So when you're talking about programming, is it in a more abstract sense? I mean, with more abstract semantics, not really programming as learning a code, or is it learning a real code, an open source software or something like that?
Yeah, you can learn coding, you know, or there's like pre-existing coding that operates really well already, and working with those pre-existing. I like the idea of like the entire whole cosmos collaborating on this big digital project. No one knows the relationship to each other, somehow building on top of each other without knowing, and stepping on each other's toes and whatnot. And, you know, we're entering in the age of the cryptocurrency where everyone is like, okay, you know, digital assets and FT. So I think these can become one form of literature. You know, you can create high digital material products, immaterial products, digital products, through just having one item that is really awesome, and only one or two or 1.5 person you can consider an Android experiencing the digital material that's being. So if that literary experience, which is a visual entity, becomes an NFT, or like a clip from a basketball game, all these can become literature, you know, like if we can marry the proficiency of commercialism, sports and art into one. I think they all can function in ways that we don't expect them to be. And I like the different type of marriages that is happening on the digital scapes, on the cryptocurrency, on the digital world, and also like using less resources to get there. You know, obviously Bitcoin takes a lot of resources. It's electrically a lot of computers, all of them are tie into, and it takes up a lot of energy. I think if we can find a way that is more sustainable, I think that's the way to go, maybe, or not. And maybe in creating something beautiful, like a one piece object from all these machines, Bitcoin exploding to $1 million, and everyone is not being able to use the electricity anymore, and whole cities wiped out by this the commercialization of that. I don't know. It's kind of beautiful, right? I welcome all form of apocalypse, as long as I left before that takes place. So I don't want to experience. I don't want to experience the edge of what I think, like when an atomic bomb, I guess, opened its mouth and we experienced the fiber and the material of its annihilation. I don't know if I want to be on the cusp of that. I think I want to be either before or after, like pro nihil, ex nihil, which is more existential, and it's not necessarily because I'm scared of the, it's just that there's no experience to document such a profound experience, and so I'm able to document before and I'm able to document after, but not while it's in its initial, in its current state. Perhaps we've built a technology or something that allow us to experience that simultaneously, but that, I think that hasn't happened. I've never seen someone who survived a suicide bomb and be able to talk about it, So anyway, I went back.
No, it's really interesting to think about the sort of ontology of terrorism in literature and how we can go beyond that and how we can start creating from destruction, from cosmological destruction, from extinction, and how all of those, because I think it's a contemporary condition, and it resonates with what you were saying about the landscape of the desert. I think it's definitely related to that, isn't it? Those aesthetics, those ontologies are recreating that aesthetic in a sense. So for now, I don't think Germán is gonna show up. Probably something happened. And we can keep going with the questions. If anyone have a question, please feel free. If not, we can ask just more generic questions and just talk a little bit about your influence, like your more direct influences from both of you. Cinematic, literary.
Fred, I think we do have some questions if we want to maybe get to those. Looks like Coco has a question.
Hi. Yeah, thank you both so much for your readings. That was really, really special to hear, both of you. I mean, yeah, I'm not super familiar with either of your work, so for me, it's, I don't know, it was really special, and thank you. I guess for Vi, I'm really now just, I mean, you gave us so much to think about right now, but really thinking now about this witnessing and the need to document, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in an open heart surgery, aren't you conscious, or like you need to be conscious and awake while they're operating on you? Like, and I'm just interested, like, I don't know, from my own kind of position having some medical issues, like this state of documenting your own body and this kind of meditative, in a way, like how pain can be meditative and discomfort. And, you know, I don't know whether it's like to escape the discomfort, to kind of go into this state. But how does that state maybe relate to writing? Perhaps.
Well,
Yeah.
I couldn't be conscious for the open heart surgery. So this is going to be quite graphic. So if you can't handle it, you might. But for those who have the appetite for what I'm about to tell, then I'll dissect it down. I had to go. They put me on fentanyl and oxycodone, and I was knocked out completely during the operation. It's impossible to be awake for it. They actually, so what they did is you see those like carpenter machines that cut through wood? Basically, they cut my sternum in half, and then so they had to break my collarbone and my sternum, and so that it can open up my heart. And then so I think it would be wise not to be awake for that. It just I don't know if I want to look down and see people like moving different parts of me around, especially my heart. And so they were trying to fix one of my valve, so inside of my left ventricle. So they have to they do a lot of there's a lot of it's invasive. There's no such thing as non-invasive heart surgery. It just everything is invasive. The way they pull blood out of my body to empty it in order to happen. But when they saw my body in half, my sternum in half, and opened that up, I think the part about it is like when you I actually became allergic to fentanyl and oxycodone after being operated. So my lung collapsed after the operation. And so they were begging me to keep me alive. And they took me off. And when they took me off the painkiller, obviously I was in a great deal of pain. I mean, it's unimaginable pain. I don't recommend it. And I experienced it. So, you know, like it's that when you are in that extreme level pain, I mean, I did beg to die, and I mean, you just want to die. It's just, there's no, when you that level pain is not an ethical decision anymore. It's not like, oh, it's like you want to be able to like end this pain, you know, and that's the most compassionate passage into. And you know, literature helps me deal with some of the pain, you know, by writing, you know, producing material, you know, so ways that in which you can leak your pain into the page and allow the reader to experience the different threshold, the different corridors of your existence as you're in pain. If that's a gift that you can give to the reader, I think whatever you give them, I think they are able, if you can transfer some of that pain onto the page, and the reader is it's open enough to receive it, I think that translation and that transaction between the reader and you can have enormous transcendental power. And you have to be very connected to another soul to be able to do that. Sometimes when I'm reading someone's work and I feel everything that they're feeling, I feel that transference is at its pure, authentic level. And as a writer, we want to be giving that level of authenticity to the viewer, because our superficiality is it's a currency that it's easy to give, and it's easy to make, and it's easy to produce. So anything that's easy is forgettable, you know, and so anything that's hard, as you're experiencing with your own body pain, that the core of that can be the source, the spring of all your great work to come. And so I would preserve, you know, think of your body as like the experience that you have as bees, and as they're collecting the nectar from honey and they're gathering it, and it's dripping every time that you produce a literary material, you are dripping that honey, and one drop of that honey, which is your pain, you know, a bee has to make 10,000 trips to get one teaspoon of honey. You are actually doing that in a very, very condensed way when you are writing. You're taking all of the literary experience of your existence and reducing it to one teaspoon of pain for the reader to read, but it's pain laced with honey and sweetness. So it's not entirely like, if you are creating authentic great work, it should be pain honey laced with honey. But if you introduce the ego into the system, then that it's gonna become quite bitter, you know, and it's the experience for the reader, it's going to be completely different. And so as you produce, I would advocate that you learn the art of reduction, you know, pulling everything that you have, instead of creating this watered down juice that's in jugs of gallons, why don't you reduce it to 1 teaspoon for us, so that it's when you carry 1 teaspoon of honey of pain, it's weightless. The transportation doesn't take that much. You're thinking about fertility and utility. In a utilitarian sense, you are reducing the agony that the experience has to read if you are giving them 3,000 of your pages of nonsense before you reach that tablespoon of whatever that's beautiful. You are preserving their kind of lifespan. You kind of add to the quality of their experience. You yourself don't want to experience 3 gallons of nonsense, so you don't want to impose that on the reader as well. I hope that answer some of your question.
Yeah, I mean, also that's maybe like the best writing advice I've received in a very long time, so thank you. But yeah, for sure.
That was incredible. Thank you so much, Vi.
I think Germán is here.
Germán is here. Hi, hola Germán. How are you?
Hello.
Hello,
Everybody.
I'm gonna read your bio and then you can read your passage, okay? Germán Sierra. Germán Sierra is a Spanish neuroscientist and writer living on the internet. He has recently published The Artifact by Inside the Castle and Fabula by Oneiros Books, a new essay book in collaboration with Brazilian philosopher Emmanuel Magno, Interstitial Intelligence, and a new novel in Spanish, Música Oscura, are forthcoming in 2022.
Okay, thank you very much. So I am expected to read now. Okay, I'll try to. First of all, excuse my pronunciation because it's really hard for me to read my own texts in English because I use a lot of words that I don't know exactly how they sound. So it may be a little bit difficult to follow sometimes. Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting you, Germán. Do you want to share your screen so we can see the text? Or
No, because the text is not on my screen. I have it in
oh,
different
okay,
screen.
okay. If you want, I can do that.
Yeah, okay.
Or yeah,
If you have it there, yeah.
yeah. You can start reading because I don't.
Okay, this text is from a short text that I published in a book edited by Mike Corrao, who is going to be, I think he's not here yet, and Andrew Wilt for 11 Press. The book is called Collected Voices from the Expanded Field, and it's a kind of strange experiment in which a bunch of writers participated. It's not an anthology, it's something that is a kind of experimental book in which we were instructed to start and finish the text with a specific sentence, but then we were free to do whatever we wanted. So I'm gonna read a short, hello? Oh, a short fragment of this text. Were you human before four-dimension transition, or just some dirty blobs of undifferentiated cells? Never mind, all matter is molecular puke. Is there something humanesque beyond that obsolescence bipedal appearance? Las máquinas mueren también, this is Spanish, the Huawei Tesla man said. How long since Huawei Tesla started manufacturing people? What's people anyway? The last time any of you checked, a minimum 55% of inherited or synthetic human tissue was a legal requirement. You are 80% average team. You would be therefore recognized as people in any territorial patch. Wondering how it was before most breed of people were corporate trade maker, yet not actually caring about brands. There's brandism enough these days, despite the abundance of night counterfeit individuals. Wild-type humans are probably overrated, but everybody wants to have access to some specimen now, since it became clear that the final thing can be fully designed in advance. Just a few minor embryonic bio-improvements, and then waiting for years until their complete development as harlequined young adults before annexing some inorganic updates, often over-engineered and mechanically baroque. Sometimes it happens that the bio part dies unexpectedly. The machinery is unable to resuscitate its organs, but keeps going. Luxated robotic silver parts marinated in rotting flesh can be spotted crawling around power stations, crushing their own bones and joining them anew. Crustacean sonborgs covered by swarming larvae and scavenged by beastie birds. Birds are filthy, you know, but you picture them clean because they look like dainty components of air and music. Why does the HT man speak Spanish? Muchos humanos sintéticos se comunican en español, en portugués, en árabe. It's a way to show that they speak for themselves, that they are not just mirrored samplets from a network harvested multi-discourse. Languages matter to simulate individual babbling. The rest is code. Every time English or Chinese are written or spoken, something is programmed, automatically uploaded and recognized as new lines to be added to the system's ongoing bibliocoidal DNOid instructions. That's how human machines are synchronized, although the process might induce choreographed prosthetic scissors in a variable percentage of the improvises. Wild types keep the barbelloidal languages they were raised in, as if they played a permanent, undivided personality role. Wild types are weaker, minimal, and whimsical, expensive to care for, only for the rich in their hypernomadic mobile mansions. Biorhythm confusing fossil angels, but skull melting sexy if they really dig you. Mummy processes made from the remains of wild types arrive from error surplus stories. Ultravioleted, asphyxiated in neutral nitrogen, seeds of the bad carbon their bodies were made of. Just a second, to drink. In the near future, they are promised, everybody will be dead for 15 minutes. Being dead will actually be entertainment, while electrons wash their column feet in the weary systems of deep time. Safe word is Dahlia, and drowning is their garden. They farm themselves for sticky venom drops. Night, not unlike fear of the cold metal meat. Horror's fetish stamped on the spring skin to cover up atrocities committed in plain sight. In the pixel dancing familiarity of strangers. Safeguard is password or password, nothing safe anyway, to psyop thoughts through manic tissues and return to world words. As if. As infinitely informed by the cosmogonic bureaucracy they had invented to drone fuck their bloodless dummies. They are you. But safeguard is they and surrender is the garden. Safeguard is password or shibboleth, kindly provided by the lurking hive brain to tuck safety away, to bleach their anuses and tentacles, to simulate an entrance, in adventurous syntactic anesthesia while being devoured. Silent mantras meant not to be pronounced in loud voice, but stir around the system once and again to cope with the brutal amplification of the present. Passwords are open doors to the machine sensorium and the hope of a charm to close holes back when pain becomes unbearable, when it starts opening cracks in your skull. And safeguards are their machine of gardens, their garden of machines and their watering hole. Reprieve from the old dusty patch. Needless to say that we are needles away from the dream of a hypernomad home, or your debt is technical, and they will not be tricked by any amount of treacherous money or eccentric behavior. They are an event, never a self. They are required to be continuously upgrading by perceiving meaningless animation and subtle gradients of psychochemical interactions. A sow built by spitting over the surface of the sun. All the wine music hosted inside their joints talks now about them. They collect toenails and teeth pulled out with scorpion claws. The moon rides its pale horses, gray cords vibrating down the honey sands. Ahead of non-human voices, Goldilocks the visitors into a party of metal and clowns. None of the 1,000 voices in the alter ego and the alter ego of the prophet's head is a human voice. Obnubilation, claim McCloud. They're foodies managing to get delicatessen delivered to the haunted house. Bleached birds, parallel mourning, anti-trees. Said to be scintillating. Death is near, even in this clean sound illuminated ruin. As madness is forbidden, they became a quotidian song. They've machine learned that sociopaths and system paths are great lovers because they only care about others' static interludes as a mechanism of control. It never made sense to grow up, becoming responsible from themselves or for others. It was an orgy of destruction, a sport. You're there to be meta-rebuilt, reconstructed by sharing with the system your recent episodes of pain, how metal bites into the flesh when collagen and hyaluronate cushions are not adequately refilled, how often anesthesia fails, all your suffering written into code, put back into the satellite of feedback loops. Drink your magnesium infusion and let yourselves be lost in the repetitive flash crash, while all your experience since the last uploading session are being sucked out by the dancers of the purple flame, statistically managed and returned to you, tagged with their proper significance by the ever-present Migdala Queen. Okay, I'm gonna stop here. I think this is long enough. It's a good sample of the kind of crazy things I write. So
it's amazing.
Thank you.
So much, Germán.
It was understandable.
Absolutely, definitely.
I mean, my voice, not the text, of course. The
all of
text
it, all of it. That's,
completely
yeah,
ununderstandable.
The text was difficult, but your voice was perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of course. And I would love to ask you a question regarding noise and regarding the glitch. How do you interpret it in your work, like haunting, time spaces, vibration, glitches, shadows, repetitions? How do you translate that into your text? Is there like a strategy, a conceptual strategy that you have underneath?
Not a very specific strategy. I mean, I'm very interested in very experimental aesthetics. And sometimes I am not that experimental. Sometimes my texts are difficult, but are kind of narrative anyway. So probably the first time you read them, you don't get the narrative rhythm, but they may need a second reading to get this rhythm. But of course, all these things are present in some ways in my writing. So I am interested in keeping mistakes. For instance, this is a way to keep these glitch aesthetics, and noise is very important in the way I write. So it's a kind of not exactly like the automatic writing of the surrealists, but it has its own flow which goes beyond the narrative. So I am more interested in keeping the flow of the language than in writing something that is very easily understood. And then I keep revising and revising and revising the text, and finally it makes sense, at least to me. So, but the sense is not the main objective when I'm writing, and especially in English, because in English I feel like more free. There are a lot of things that I wouldn't dare to write in Spanish because it doesn't sound well to me, but in English I don't care. I mean, it's like yeah, it's like a different instrument. It's very funny because, you know, I'm not immersed in English language. I read a lot of things in English, but I don't speak English regularly. And you know, my classes are in Spanish. All my work is in Spanish, except writing papers. So I'm not very immersed in English, especially in spoken English. So I feel like very free when I write English. It was something that really surprised me when I started writing fiction in English, because I used to write essays and especially scientific papers in English. But when I started writing fiction, suddenly I realized that I felt like more free to make things up.
Yeah, probably because you feel more artificial, right? Because it's your second language, and that's how it feels for me.
Yeah, and also I like artificial things. So
Yeah,
I never try to be natural when I'm writing. Sometimes it might sound natural, but I don't know. I grew up from Baroque literature, so I like artifacts actually.
Hey, me too. Thank you, Germán. Anyone from the audience has a question? Romina?
Am I being put on the spotlight right now? No, I was actually going to ask, well, first, Germán, that was awesome.
Thank you.
I really like your work. No, my question was precisely about the use of English, also in relation to this idea of a cadence of it doesn't need to be all or nothing, right? And I was thinking, since you were talking about the flow of the text, does it always, your ideas or the sounds that come to mind, are they always in English when you're writing in English? Yeah, does it happen to you that it comes in Spanish maybe, or Portuguese, or and how do you grapple with that? Or maybe you can turn that switch on and off, but in my experience, that's not the case. And I was thinking also, because you're making us work as readers, where it would be interesting to keep it multilingual and multicultural in a way that would be also a challenge for the reader to understand what the words mean in other languages other than English, not only in terms of what they mean, like a dictionary definition, but also within the text, the meaning that they carry within that very specific logic that your text constructs, right?
Okay, thank you. Those are a lot of things. Yeah, the rhythm usually comes in a mix of both languages, but I read a lot in English, so it's kind of easy sometimes for me to get, once I start writing in English, then it goes easily, it flows by itself. And the same happens in Spanish, but sometimes they mix. I really been thinking for a long time to write something in both languages. Right now I'm writing a new novel in Spanish, which is maybe more experimental than the things that I've been doing in Spanish before. And it's funny because sometimes I feel that I'm introducing a lot of English rhythm. I don't know why. And this happened to me when I wrote The Artifact, which was the first long thing that I wrote in English. First, I was very afraid that my English was very Spanish. I mean, that a lot of constructions like long sentences and all these kind of things, that they kept a lot of Spanish structures. I think Vi does the same thing with Vietnamese, at least in the first book that I read by her, which is Fishing Exile. I noticed this a lot, and I was like very, I felt very close to the things that I was doing, because it wasn't intended, but I didn't try not to do it anyway. I mean, I like using long sentences in English and Baroque English. So it's not a problem for me that some sentences are like very Spanish in structure. But I was really afraid that when native English readers started reading the book, it sounded like very strange to them. And at least a few people that I talked about The Artifact, they say that it doesn't sound like that. So John Triffitt told me, no, it's like if you were Native American. Not at all. I mean, there are a lot of things that are taken from Spanish literature in this book. But I don't know if this answers your question.
Absolutely, that was great, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. And now Alex.
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
I was just wondering if you could talk for a second about the relationship between your science and your writing. Like I work as a neuroscientist as well. And I don't know, like I find myself a lot of times like wanting to just, you know, getting caught by like something within this arena that's really beautiful. But then if you filtering that into poetry or like writing in general can be a very messy process sometimes, because there's so many pitfalls around like, you know, getting too didactic about it, or like, I I don't know, all of that. Yeah. So I wonder how, like, how that works out with you.
Well, there are two things that I did all my life, so they kind of mix very well. I mean, I use a lot of scientific language in my novels. I use a lot of words that come from different sciences, including neuroscience. Of course, I take a lot of ideas from, not exactly from what I do, which is kind of specific. I work in experimental epilepsy in animals, so very specific procedures and these kind of things. More about theories, ideas, especially if they are crazy theories or crazy ideas. I like them more. So I am more free to develop a hypothesis and take it to whatever I want. While when doing science, I need to do experiments, you know, and show that this is really how it really works in the lab or whatever. And in fiction, I can do whatever I want. So I can take my crazy ideas to any point that I would like to take. But they are feeding each other all the time. I mean, I try to feed a bit of literature also in my scientific practice, which is not so easy. But I think it helps me to develop also hypotheses, and, you know, and not to be very very limited by a very like utilitaristic proposals and this kind of things. No? But I did that for a long time, so it's kind of natural for me. I just came from giving a class in molecular biology a couple of hours ago. Then I start reading something and I change, and I don't know. But of course, there is a lot of presence of science in all my books. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Germán.
Yeah.
Jared.
Hi, sorry. I guess if I'm not interrupting anyone else who had their hand raised, I had a question. Well, first, I want to say this has been a terrific event. Thank you, Fred, Vi, Mike, and Germán.
Thank you.
So I had I guess a question I wanted to direct toward Mike, but I think all of the guests tonight could probably or hopefully chime in with their own thoughts as well. You know, well, I also love how many of us announced earlier on that they were not poets, and thinking about the relationship between science and something like poetry, which has often been considered disparate categories. They both seem to come from the same place of invention, testing and hypothesizing, which I find really interesting. Blaise Cendrars was one poet, I think in particular, who navigated the intersections of poetry and something like, I don't know, what is it called? Not architecture. I don't know, where you build highways and roads, whatever that is. But I guess relatedly, again, I wanted to direct this toward Mike, but also hopefully Vi and Germán could chime in. How one maneuvers between experimentation, you know, working within those sort of shadowy places like the gutter, Vi from an apocalyptic wishing to sort of die space, and also just how one maneuvers between something like experimentation, testing, generic boundaries, the material and immaterial, with, for some of you, intelligibility, but also legibility. I find that a very interesting tension. So thank you. I'm just interested about that.
Yeah, I think that when I had first started doing kind of more unconventional work, I had this big concern about kind of genre. Whenever I gave the work to someone to edit, one of the kind of guiding questions would be like, what is this? And so I think I found that there's something very freeing about kind of no longer asking that question or really thinking about it when I work. There's a sense that I now, I've had the pleasure of doing the typesets and design for books that Germán and Vi have both written, and have kind of done a lot of work in that specific book design space. So I now actually, I think since a year or two ago, I think probably 2 years ago now, have started working on all my book length stuff in InDesign from the start. And I found that, at least for my kind of particular mixture of design and writing, that it helps to kind of be in that visual space immediately. I had originally worked in Word and then transferred it over, but that becomes really limiting. And there's this kind of daunting middle step where you have to then take it out of the horrid or like arcane space of Word and try to make it functional again. But so I think having that that particular layout of InDesign, that's the 2-page spread, is kind of how it's presented by default, has become this very freeing space to kind of test things out that I can kind of at least one kind of level of abstraction less away from the physical object. I can look at that spread and kind of feel it out and move things around. And initially, I think I had this fear of a shallowness to the text when I incorporated the visuals right away. But I think that I find something very compelling about the text itself as, in some degree, a visual medium. And so incorporating kind of the look and feel of different lines and words into a very visual kind of design-oriented layout. And that kind of builds on that navigability that I was talking about earlier. It gives the text, I think, a certain kind of architectural quality. In the same way that an architect is concerned with how you're moving through the building, I get concerned about that within the book. And so I think having that immediate access to the physicality has made the kind of experimentation a lot more, not streamlined, but direct for me. And so it ends up just being this prodding until the work feels kind of cohesive, kind of editing and going back and forth and kind of cycling through the text until something kind of assembles, whether I notice it or not.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. There's also something about translatability there too. I don't know. Well, I don't want to take up anyone's time if anyone else has questions. But I was also wondering, Vi, if you had, I don't know, a process about considering your readers and how that might limit, perhaps, your ability to experiment with language, with form, with the visual, the verbal.
I mean, my bachelor degree was in visual art, and so that's always when I make when I write. That's always going to be in the back of my consciousness. Converting my literary products into artistic containers for more artistic containers. And so sometimes I think about the reader in the sense that if I create a block of text that is, if it's designed to not be consumable, then I would try to make it not so. But lately I've been making I've been making literary products that have already preconceived containers that I had planned years ago, like maybe a decade or so ago or two ago, and they are finally manifesting at this moment. So I'm more like the reader is someone that is a self of I guess a Vi Khi Nao 20 years ago. So I'm attending to that reader from my past, someone who used to, I guess, lead a parallel life with my artistic visions of what constitute my future self in the written form. And so I'm still attending to those projects because some part of me, and when a literary product enters the world, it takes time. Sometimes you produce it and 5 or 10 years later it enters the world. And so certain projects do become obsolete in my consciousness. It's not my fault. I think it's the markets, the commercialization's attention to the work that it needs to enter the world. I try my best to get the work out as soon as possible so it doesn't become obsolete. And so there are works of mine that are entering the world now that I feel nothing for. And oftentimes the reader will have they feel everything with it. And it's almost I enter a divorce relationship with the reader, even though we've never been married. And I'm always grappling with how to be attentive to that divorce proceedings. And so do I, drag them along and make it a long battle in which no one gets any access and it's go to the lawyers, which is the commercialization of the publishing industry? Or do I take what is important and just like try to fight for that 1 acre of material that is mine? So ultimately the readers, because they get to experience a self of mine that's no longer mine at times. I don't know if any of my work is pertinent to me anymore. It may be pertinent to the readers as they are experiencing it for the first time. But for me, I am done with it. There are certain books of mine that the soul has left, but the flesh is there, and the flesh is the book form. I hope that maybe somehow answers some part of your question.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. It's interesting to think about the textual containers sort of living an adjacent life to the frame of something like a portrait or visual art. So it's interesting to see how those two elements come together in your work or your expressive work as a whole. So yeah, thank you, Vi. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vi.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. Is there any other question? Anyone else? If not, we are actually running out of time. If there's no other questions, I think we can wrap things up. Let's wait a little bit to see if somebody wants to move. We'll move. Thank you, Nicola. So it was a pleasure to have you guys. It was beautiful. The 3 of you are amazing. My 3 favorite writers. I hope to meet you in person soon. I mean, I hope that's a possibility. It's gonna happen for sure. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending to this event. I hope to see you next time. Our next event is gonna be Wayne Kostenbaum and Gabriel Ojeda Sagué. It's gonna be a reading and conversation similar to this one. And hope to see you all. Have a good night. Thank you so much, guys.
Good night. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Take care.
Frederick,